My name is Hope Reynolds, and I am a breast cancer survivor.
The wall behind you, I just love it. As soon as we walked in, I was drawn to it. What is it?
It's my life, yeah. These pictures, I've lived in this apartment for about 2 years, but those pictures are kind of the accumulation of what the past 4 years of my life has looked like.
And the middle says pray big. Yeah, tell me what the middle says.
No, I don't even know.
It says pray big, worry small.
It says pray big, worry small. I actually got that as a gift for my best friend and roommate for Christmas one year. But I just loved it because it's kind of how we live our lives. Yeah, and I feel like cancer has brought on that mindset just to pray as much as I can, because I feel like cancer taught me that there's so much outside of my control. So I just resort to prayer in those moments and then trying not to worry about the small things.
Tell me, so you said this is your life, and it really is about the last 4 years. What was the biggest thing that happened to you during those 4 years?
I think the biggest thing was just restarting my life. PT school. So I did PT school for about 3 years, and now I've been working as a physical therapist for close to a year. And just I feel like those pictures to me represent the connections and the good times. And so there's so many people included in those pictures, and I feel like that's what the 4 years have meant for me.
Tell me about your diagnosis. So tell me about that time in your life.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed in September of 2020. And so kind of backtracking a little bit, that was the time of COVID, relatively early in COVID. I was starting my senior year of undergrad at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. But I'm originally from Pennsylvania, so I was away from family when I was diagnosed. And over the summer, I was a swimmer, so we were just getting changed one day in the locker room and had noticed some changes in terms of my right breast. And my undergrad roommate at the time, she kind of pointed it out, and not in a bad way, but we kind of made fun of it. We were like, oh my God, that's so weird. Kind of ignored it for a couple of months, and then ended up just getting really sick towards the end of August. Really bad migraines, was not able to eat anything, and just throwing up everything that I put into my body. So I called my mom on her birthday. Now we have a joke, she doesn't like her birthday. I called her and told her how I was feeling, and then told her about the changes that I had noticed. And she asked if I had done a self-exam, which I had never done before because I was 21 at the time and didn't think that was something you even had to do that young. So when we hung up, I did a self-exam and I found a lump. So I immediately told her, and she was like, you need to see a doctor. About a week later, I met with my primary care physician, and they wanted me to get a mammogram done. And when I left that call, and also I will say that with that call, I primarily was seeing my primary care physician for my migraines and for how I was feeling, and kind of mentioned the lump as a side note. And then they asked me to get the mammogram done, and I called the place where I was going to get the mammogram done, and they said that they wouldn't give me a mammogram because I was so young. And so I had to go back to the primary care physician and tell them what they had said, and they were like, okay, well, let's get an ultrasound then. So they were able to do an ultrasound. And so about a week later, I had the ultrasound done, and I still remember the person who read my ultrasound came in and said that she saw something that was concerning, but the odds of it being cancer were so low because of my age. So again, I left that appointment feeling reassured that it wasn't anything too serious, but they wanted to do a biopsy just to be sure. So I went back a couple days later and got a biopsy done, and then waited about 4 days and got the call from the nurse, and that was when I was diagnosed with stage 3B breast cancer. It was invasive ductal carcinoma, and it had already spread to one of the lymph nodes on my right side. So they had biopsied the lymph node as well. And so that was in September 14th of 2020.
What went through your mind?
My first thought, and I still remember it to this day, was I don't have time for this. I was beginning my senior year of undergrad. I was applying to PT schools. I was a swimmer in college, so we were just starting our swim season. And just managing all of that in and of itself took all of my time and energy. So I just couldn't imagine how to keep doing all of that and then also go through cancer treatment. And then after having that initial thought, it kind of just became like, okay, what now? Like, how do I plan the logistics of this? And I am like so lucky that I have the most amazing parents in the world who took on all the logistics for me. So all I had to do was kind of just show up. So that was like, my thoughts were then just kind of transitioned to like, okay, I'm just going to do this.
And so you were how old when you were diagnosed?
I was 21.
What do people say when you say that?
They just say that, wow, you're so young. And then they ask, like, how did you catch it? Or like, yeah, they're just in shock, which is how I felt.
You know, tell me about treatment. What was that? What did your treatment consist of?
So I ended up going home to Pennsylvania for treatment, and I went through 8 rounds of chemotherapy. They called it dose-dense ACT. And so because of my age, I was able to get chemo every other week instead of getting it every like 3 weeks or any variation like that. After finishing my 8 rounds of chemotherapy, I had a bilateral mastectomy in February of 2021. And then because of my pathology results, they wanted to do radiation. So I went through 25 days of radiation, and that ended in about April of 2021. And then at that point, I still had expanders in place. Then I had another surgery in July, and they switched my expanders for implants.
So, what was kind of the worst part of all of that? What was the toughest part? What was the toughest part of all of that?
Yeah, out of all of that, I would say the toughest part for me was losing my hair. That was like the hardest day of my cancer journey. Just, I like loved having my long hair, and it kind of just started, or I guess represented like the start of treatment for me. And it was just, I didn't want to accept that it was real, but when I had to cut my hair, and then as my hair started to fall out, like there was no way to ignore it anymore. But I will say, I feel like now looking back on it, the hardest part for me has been life after cancer.
I'm surprised to hear you say that. Or I guess I wasn't expecting you to say that. What has been the tough part after treatment?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me has been learning to trust my body again, because I don't understand, and there'll never be any reason as to why I got it so young. And so like every ache or pain, all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, I have cancer again, and it was terrifying. But then also learning to accept that I can live my life and not have to be consumed by thoughts about cancer anymore, because when I was diagnosed, everything all of a sudden in your life revolves around the word cancer. And so learning that I cannot think about it, and that I don't have to worry that me not thinking about it means I'm ignoring something, has been really difficult.
Okay, so you were 21, but you were really healthy. Tell me about, you were an athlete. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was a college swimmer. I really cared about my health from a performance standpoint, but also I work in healthcare now. Health has always been something I've been very passionate about for myself. So I was kind of a bit of a health nut. I was running like 5 miles a day, training for swimming. I really watched what I put into my body and what I was eating. And that's like one of the reasons that I don't have anything that I can attribute this to, because I did try my best at least to take care of my body as much as I could.
Does not run in your family?
Nope, not at all. And they did genetic testing when I was diagnosed, and everything came back normal.
Yeah. So you ran 5 miles a day, super healthy eater, doesn't run in your family. Mm-hmm. You still got it at 21.
Yeah.
I asked you this before. Do you ever think, what could this be? Could it be the food? Could it be, do you ever go through those scenarios?
Yeah, I think especially when I was first diagnosed, I was trying to figure out, how could this have happened to me? I just didn't understand it. And I think that especially going through treatment, my family and I would have conversations about it. And I find that stuff really interesting to learn about, but I've also found that it can kind of trigger my stress to try and find what to attribute it to. I've heard all about things like plastic in the environment, hormones, makeup, food, stress, all of that stuff. And I feel like especially knowing myself and my personality, I think that there was a little bit of belief that my like anxiety and stress could have contributed to it. But I've also just learned that there's so many 21-year-olds who have anxiety and stress and they don't get breast cancer. So I don't know. And I find it interesting to learn about, but I don't know if I'll ever really know why I got it at 21.
There is research showing cancer is getting younger. Tell me your thoughts on that.
I just think it's really sad that it is getting younger, but it makes me really passionate to share my story, because I think that it shows that there can be a life after cancer too, and that cancer survivors can do anything that everyone else can do. It makes me want to share my story, because so many people are getting diagnosed younger and younger with so many different types of cancer. So I just feel like sharing that they're not alone, because it was really hard when I was diagnosed. I didn't feel like there was anyone that matched me in the cancer world, that there was no one that I could like see myself in. So it made it hard to find that support system in other individuals that understood what I was going through.
I mean, you couldn't even get a mammogram.
Yeah.
You were too young. Talk about when you went to chemotherapy. Was anyone else your age?
Not there for chemo. There were some patients that were around my age that were there for more like other type of treatments, like hematology. But no, most of the people there were in 60s, 70s, 80s, and above. I stood out. Really, really obviously, I stood out.
When you tell people, even other people with cancer, even other young people with cancer, when you tell them your age, or what do you tell me about that exchange?
Yeah. And I know we were talking earlier. It's been helpful to start to be exposed to hearing about especially young women with breast cancer. I've heard about women being diagnosed late in their 20s. I think maybe the youngest I've heard since is 26. But breast cancer too, they consider it young when you're in your 30s and 40s, and even 50s sometimes is like on the younger end. And so when I hear that, it's helpful to know that it wasn't just me, but then it's also like, I say that I was 21 and their eyes still get super wide, because for them, they've always been the youngest in the room to be going through cancer, and particularly breast cancer. And so it's like this weird competition that somehow I won, that I'm the youngest, and it's not a competition I wanted to win. But I find it comforting, and I hope that they find it comforting to know that there's other young women who have gone through what they've gone through.
Right. Okay, so I'm noticing on the wall these tattoos. Tell me about that.
Yes. So I want to say it was 2022. I actually went with my roommate and best friend that lives here. We went together, and I got my tattoo. It was about a year after my mastectomy when I got it done. And so the meaning behind the word believe, and there's so many meanings. When I was diagnosed, my swim team wanted to make bracelets for me, and they wanted like a slogan, and then they wanted a Bible verse. And so the slogan became believe in hope, and there's so many meanings to all of the words. But it was kind of sparked by, I have an anchor tattoo on my ankle, and it's the Bible verse, Hebrews 6:19, that says we have this hope as the anchor for our soul. So kind of surrounding my name, surrounding the word hope. I went to Hope College. Like, there's so many connections. And then the word believe for me just like really stuck with me, like believing that everything's going to be okay, having faith that God was in control and that he was going to take care of me, and to believe in myself, but then to also believe in just having hope for a future without cancer, and a better future, and to be better. And then, so in terms of the tattoo, I got the word believe with the pink ribbon done. My roommate got a heart, and one side of her heart is pink for me. The other side is orange for her dad, who had cancer. And then a couple of months later, my mom came to visit, and I took her to get a tattoo, and she got the word believe, and the B is the pink ribbon, because we couldn't get matching ones, but I said we could coordinate.
I love it. Why do that? I mean, it's so beautiful, but why do it?
I just wanted something that I could look down at and always be reminded of what I went through, but in a positive way.
Did you ever think going through it like this, what if I don't make it through this?
Yeah, I definitely had those thoughts. And those were the dark moments where it was really hard to stay positive. And I feel really lucky that I didn't feel like I was always consumed by thoughts like that, because I think that would have made it harder to get through it. But no, those thoughts definitely crept up, and I feel like it was almost like a doubt. Like I always had such a positive mindset that I was going to be okay. But then in those moments, I was like, well, what if I'm not? And it was more of just like this really big question of like, I've been so positive and like going through treatments, and it's like, what if it was all for nothing? What if I'm not going to be okay? And those were the scary moments.
Duke has this group researching why cancer is getting younger.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a part of it? Have you heard of it?
I haven't.
It's like Yogi, I think is the acronym. I mean, you work there. How does it feel knowing that they are, researching this and trying to figure out what's happening?
I love it. I think it's absolutely amazing, and I think that it's something that's been needed. And I think particularly, like back to the question of understanding why, I would love to know why, but I also just think that it's so great that they're researching it, because especially like young adults, there's such like we're kind of missing the support for people around my age in terms of when we have cancer, then life after cancer. So there's so many unique aspects to supporting a young adult going through cancer or after cancer. And so I love that they're researching the increasing rates, because it also increases just like awareness of these lapses in support and lapses in research, including this age group.
So tell me about that. So you're saying for young people with cancer, there are these gaps. Mm-hmm. What do you mean?
I think particularly in terms of how to get back to life after cancer. There's so many changes going on in your life at that time that are hard to manage in and of themselves, I think. And then adding in cancer treatment, it just adds this whole element, like things like fertility, dating, sexual health, nutrition, financial status. I mean, the list goes on. Like everything changed for me at that time that I was going through cancer. In terms of just regular life stuff, and then throwing cancer into the mix, it was just like, okay, how do I navigate all of these changes that are going on in my life in the context of also going through cancer treatment? And then even afterwards, like planning for a future sometimes can feel really hard for me, because it brings up this little doubt in the back of my mind of like, well, what if I don't have a future? And that's where those like scary thoughts come in. And so I try not to think about it, but like support in those moments, I feel like that's definitely been missing.
What about insurance?
Yeah, I could really get going on insurance. I work in healthcare, so I see it from all sides of things. When I first went home to get treatment, I was not allowed to get a lot of my scans done because the hospital did not accept my dad's insurance. And so he had to switch insurance plans. And luckily it didn't take that long, so none of my treatments were really delayed. But it was like a hoop to jump through. Moving on from that, like I was on my dad's insurance, which was great. And I feel really lucky to have been in that situation. But now, as I just turned 26 last week, I no longer can be on my parents' insurance. So I feel like I prioritize health insurance a lot more than probably most people my age. And I love working at Duke because of for so many reasons, but it is really nice that through working there, I have great health insurance. Yeah. And that definitely was like something that I had to consider very, very much so when choosing a job.
Talk about how are you doing now?
Yeah, I think good. And I always say I think because I still have that little bit of doubt of it's like, I don't really know. Like there could always be something going on that I'm not aware of. But I feel good. I feel like I am accomplishing all the things that I want to be in life right now. And I feel good. I am still on some medications, but I feel healthy, and I don't feel like they limit me in terms of what I do.
And you're how many years? You said you just celebrated what, cancer-free?
4 years. Yeah.
You run all the time still?
Yes.
How often?
More than I should. Probably like 4 to 5 times a week I run.
You run more than you should?
Yeah, probably.
Like it's too, like you need to take a break.
Yeah.
But why do you do it?
The biggest thing for me is mental health. It just, also being an athlete for my whole life, I need something where I just get outside and just kind of push my body to the limit. It feels good to me, and yeah, for mental health and to stay active and healthy.
What else? What else haven't I asked about? I mean, obviously you're sharing your story. We're interviewing other young people. Why talk about this really tough time in your life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm really passionate to talk about it because it's the one thing that I can do in order to help other people going through cancer, especially at a young age. I also just really want to bring awareness to the fact that cancer can happen to anyone. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how healthy you are. So knowing your body, checking in with your body, and then advocating for yourself when you feel like something is not right. But yeah, so many reasons.